Hi, James Long, and we're down at Jackson's Mixed Martial Arts Association in Pueblo, Colorado. We're here at the Vapor Source Suite at the Jackson's MMA, and today we're here to review the Suorin Drop. The Suorin Drop is the latest and the greatest from the same people who brought you the Suorin Air. If you are unaware of what, say, the Suorin Drop or the Suorin Air is, it is going to be a pod vaping system. And kind of like a pod vaping system, they're very similar to your old school cig-alike devices. And by cig-alike, I mean devices that are very much so resembling the idea of a cigarette. Back then, we had a lot of other devices, smaller battery capacities, and not as consistent of hits. Nowadays, we have what we consider a pod system, and although some argue that this may be the latest and the greatest thing and the next generation of vaping. So, very similar to your old school cig-alike devices. And what I mean by a cig-alike device is I'm talking about a device that is very closely resembles a cigarette. The benefit of this, guy, is you're going to have the same concept, or at least a very similar concept to a lot of those older school cig-alike devices, but with today's technology. What that means for you is a closer vape, something that's going to very closely resemble a cigarette and give you that satisfaction that you're looking for. So let's go ahead and unpackage this, take a look at it, talk about it, fill her up, vape on it. So talk about packaging here. So the packaging on this is actually very impressive for a smaller device. It's actually more closely resembles a cell phone box or even like a higher end device box. So you kind of have this nice outer sleeve, and then underneath you have the nice little flip cap. Once you open that up, you can see that you have your Suorin Drop, and then you do have the one pod system that is currently attached to it. Now this device does come in 5 different colors, so you can actually get this available in yellow, red, baby blue, black, or gray. As you see, I have the red version of the device right here. Very sleek look, very vibrant color. One of my favorite things, and it's one of the first things that I notice when I pull this device out of the box, is the material. It has a very nice thick rubber coating on it, which I feel comfortable using because I'm a very clumsy person, so I feel like that does add a little bit more stability to it. I also live in the state of Colorado, so it's kind of nice to not have something metal to carry around, because during the winter, metal devices do get cold. Underneath this, they do give you a few other goodies as well, if you want to consider them goodies. So right here we do have a USB cable. Yes, the device does charge through micro USB. If you look at the very bottom of the device right here, you do have a micro USB slot. Go ahead and plug that in, plug it into any wall adapter. It takes about 45 minutes to charge from full once that device is dead. They also do give you a few instructions right here, so you have instructions on filling it. Really all this guy is saying right here is after filling the device, allow that pod to sit for approximately 5 to 8 minutes prior to vaping on it, and that's just to ensure that you do not get any dry hits or burn out that pod within the first hit or so. Inside this box right here, they do give you a full user manual. Very large, but do not be intimidated. There is just a lot of languages in it. Inside the manual, it does describe a few of like your basics, so it tells you the size of the battery. This is a 310 milliamp battery, which doesn't sound like a very large battery, but with the smaller devices and with a lot of like the newer technology that we have been able to put into devices, a 310 milliamp battery for this style of device is a very large battery. Personally, I get somewhere between 6 to 8 hours, and that is me of consistently vaping on it. And then 45-minute charge time, I think the pros will outweigh the cons there. So to kind of set this device up, you're going to need to remove the actual pod itself. Now, when it comes to the juice that you're going to want to use in here, since it is a smaller, more mouth-to-lung device, I do recommend a thinner juice. The company does say that a 70 VG 30 PG works the best. From my personal experience, I tend to I tend to like the 50-50 to more 60-40 blend on these devices. 70-30, although does work, it is a little bit thicker. It does not tend to wick as fast. So today I'm actually going to be using the Naked 100 Salt Nicks, and it's going to be a 50-50 blend, so pretty thin liquid, but it should run through this device pretty well. Anything lower than a 50-50, if you're more moving into like your 60 PG, 40 VG ratio and higher, you might get a little bit of leak through. They do say with 50-50 you could get some leak through. I personally have not had any issues of that such. Like I said, today we're going to go ahead and use Naked 100's Salt Nick e-liquid. So this is actually going to be their Brain Freeze, which is a strawberry, kiwi, pomegranate, mint, and yes, it does utilize the salt nicotine. One thing about the salt nicotine, it is a little bit more pure. So out of like these smaller devices, I do tend to like the way that the Salt Nick works over, say, like a True Nick or a Platinum nicotine blend. And the reason being is because I feel like that nicotine, with it being a little bit more potent, it is going to give you a slightly different nicotine fix than your other nicotines would. It's also going to be a lot more consistent, so you will be able to take less draws on it with getting that same satisfaction out of it. This is actually going to be a 50 milligram nicotine. Yes, I know that sounds very high. Out of a device like this, a 35 to 50 actually tends to work pretty well. So to actually fill these pods, if you look at the very bottom of the device, you have these two rubber gaskets. Pretty much, we're going to go ahead and lift those gaskets up, and underneath each gasket, that is going to be your fill hole. Directly under the fill hole, it's kind of difficult to see, but you can see the actual wicking material. So as you're filling that up, you will be able to wick it. If you do have a smaller unicorn bottle, it does tend to work pretty well with this particular pod. However, they do give you some pretty wide openings, so even like a smaller glass dropper does tend to work pretty well with it. And you are going to have to go fill up both sides. So each side is actually an individual chamber. So one thing to make sure is that you do fill both sides up. If you only fill one side up, you might get a little bit of liquid that goes into that other chamber, but it might not fully saturate the other side of that wick. So I do recommend just filling it through both fill ports. And once you get that together, you do want to let that sit for approximately 5 to 8 minutes. And that's just going to allow that juice gets all the way through that wick, makes that fully saturated so you don't burn out that pod and you don't get that burnt hit.
5 minutes later.
Go ahead and double check that wick. I kind of like to hold it up to a light. Seems to be a really good way to see it since the pod is more of like a gray tone or like a smoke tone. But take a look at that wick. Make sure that that wick is fully saturated. Once you notice that wick is fully saturated, you are good to vape on that. Pretty much to install the pod, it is extremely simple. All you have to do is snap her in. And then once that's snapped in, you have no buttons to control wattage, you don't have any on or off switch, and you do not have any power switch to allow that to vaporize. It is just going to be an auto pull draw. So let's give it a shot. First thing I noticed, and what I'm really impressed about already, is that this is a brand new pod. And one thing about like a lot of older cig-like devices is once you get that juice inside the pod, you almost have a break-in period. And with that break-in period, you are tasting fresh wick, fresh cotton with a slight flavor of your e-liquid. And after you go through about a tank of that flavor tends to work its way through. First initial hit off of this, I just get a blast of flavor. No dry hit, no cotton flavor, just the pure brain freeze that I threw in there, and that is phenomenal. Throat hit on this guy, since I'm using a 50, obviously I'm going to have quite a bit more throat hit there. With this, I've also noticed, since it is a slightly more airy than some of the other pod-like systems, if you're comparing it to, say, a Joule, a Fix, or a Limitless Pulse pod, this one I feel like you could almost have the option to use this as not only a mouth to lung, but a straight to lung if you desired. Me personally, I would prefer to use this more of as a mouth to lung device, considering that is what it is more meant for. But surprisingly, it gives you a lot of vapor, it gives you a lot of flavor, and it's honestly very satisfying to hit on. With this pod, they estimate that you'll be able to fill this pod up about 5 times, give or take, before having to replace that pod for a new one. Each pod holds about 10 or about 2 mils of juice, so you're looking at about 10 mils of juice that you can run through this pod before having to change it out. One huge benefit is these pods only run about $5 a piece, making that way cheaper for you. And I'm going to be honest, one of my favorite things, now I've used a lot of pod systems. I am a huge fan of mouth-to-lung vapes. I like my high-end mods. I like my low-end devices. With this device, even though it is a lower-end device, it feels more high quality. On top of it, it is slimmer than your iPhone. It is very sleek and it slides in your pocket very well, which may or may not be a pro or con, because even though it fits in your pocket, you might lose it in your pocket. JK, that is totally a plus because it is small and concealable. You can bring this just about anywhere. It's kind of hard to see in the light, but when you do hit this, it does let off a blue light through the pod system itself. One thing to keep in mind is when that light turns red, your battery is approximately 30% or less, and I do recommend throwing it on the charger at that point in time. One thing to keep in mind about this device is, like I said, I highly, highly, highly recommend using the salt nicks out of this. One thing about the salt nicks is you may notice vapor production is not all that impressive. Here's the benefit. You do not need that vapor production. Once you actually hit this bad boy, I promise you will fall in love, just like I did. Again, we're here at Jackson's Mixed Martial Arts down in Pueblo in the Vapor Source VIP Suite. If you liked this video and you want to see more videos like this, then please subscribe, follow this channel, and don't forget to go onto our website as well, because we do carry this guy. This guy goes for approximately $40, $42 on our website, and you can pick up our naked salts as well. We have the Brain Freeze, we also have the Really Berry, and then on top of it, we do have the Lava Flow as well. All are 3 phenomenal flavors, and all will taste delicious out of this device, and they are available both in 35 and 50 milligrams of nicotine. And if you aren't interested in that, go ahead and try some of our Vapor Source house juice in there. Some of our really good tobaccos and menthol flavors run phenomenally through it, and of course, one of my favorites, blue raspberry out of a smaller device. So go ahead, please follow this channel and have a wonderful day.